Good day everyone. I am Justin Okakal. So today I'll be discussing an interesting topic about writing fiction. So before we start, here are our objectives. So at the end of the lesson, the students are expected to explain the general rules in creative writing such as obeying grammar, showing instead of telling, maintaining tone, and using adjectives responsibly. Then value the use of proper language, grammar, and tone as a sign of respect for readers and the art of writing. And the last one is use correct grammar, punctuation, and style in writing their own fictional piece. So now, what is fiction? Fiction is a literature created from the imagination, not presented as fact, true. It may be based on a story or situation. So fiction means a type of writing that comes from the writer's imagination. So it is not completely true, even if it may be inspired by real events or people. The next is what makes a good fiction book. So in fiction, the author's job is to entertain and induce an emotional reaction in the reader. So a good fiction book is one that makes readers feel something. It entertains them, makes them imagine, and keeps them excited to know what happens next. So the main goal of a fiction writer is to make the readers enjoy the story and feel connected to it.
And now I will be discussing the types and elements of fiction. So the first one is fantasy. Fantasy fiction is a genre of speculative fiction that utilizes magic and other supernatural elements as central plot points, themes, or settings. So these stories often take place in entirely imagined worlds, sometimes with mythical creatures and characters, and often draw inspiration from mythology and folklore. So it's a genre that allows for escapism and exploration of fantastical concepts, often contrasting with the familiar realm of realism. The next one is science fiction. Science fiction or sci-fi is a genre of speculative fiction that explores uh, the impact of science and technology on society and individuals, often in futuristic or imaginative settings. So it typically involves elements like advanced technology, space exploration, time travel, and encounters with extraterrestrial life. While rooted in scientific concepts, it often ventures into fictional possibilities and philosophical questions about humanity's future. So an example of fantasy fictions is the famous The Lord of the Rings, and an example of science fiction is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. And the next one is horror fiction. So horror fiction is a genre designed to evoke feelings of fear, dread, and unease in the reader. It often explores themes of death and supernatural, the macabre, and the unknown, using frightening imagery and unsettling situations to create a sense of terror. Uh, the next one is historical fiction. It's a literary genre where the story takes place in the past. Historical novels captures the details of the time period as accurately as possible for authenticity, including social norms, manners, customs, and tradition. So, an example of horror fictions are Dracula and Frankenstein. And for historical fiction, an example of historical fiction is The Summer of Broken Stories. Then the next one is romance. Romance fiction is a genre focused on the development and exploration of romantic relationships between two or more individuals, typically with a happy or satisfying ending. So it encompasses a wide range of subgenres, including contemporary, historical, paranormal, and even romantic suspense, and can be found across various media platforms. So the next one is mystery. Mystery fiction is a genre where the plot centers around a puzzling event, often a crime that needs to be solved by a protagonist, usually a detective. The genre is characterized by suspense, clues, suspects, and a resolution that reveals the truth behind the mystery. So mystery fiction can encompass various subgenres, including detective stories, crime fiction, and historical mysteries. An example of romance fiction is The Love Hypothesis, and for mystery is the famous Sherlock Holmes. Then let us proceed to the elements of fiction. The first one is the character. So the individuals, animals, or entities that populate the story. Readers learn about characters through their actions, dialogue, and internal thoughts. And the next one is the setting. So The time and place where the story unfolds, it can be crucial to the plot or simply provide background. Then the plot, the sequence of events that make up the story. It typically includes an exposition or the introduction, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Then there's the conflict. So the conflict, the struggle between opposing forces. So this can be internal within a character or external or against another character, nature, or society. The next one is point of view, the perspective from which the story is told. Common points of common points of view includes first person using I, third person third person limited, focusing it focuses on one character's thoughts, and third person omniscient, knowing all characters' thoughts. Then we have the theme, the underlying message or central idea that the author explores in the story. It's the overarching idea or insight about life that the author wants to convey.
The next is general reminders for writing fiction. The first one is obey the rules of grammar, usage, and punctuation. Creative writers should use language intentively, but they do not have a license to ignore the basic rules of good English. So even if we are writing creatively, we still need to follow the rules of grammar, spelling, and punctuation. So being creative does not mean we can ignore correct English. So readers can enjoy creative writing, but only if they can understand it clearly. So for example, he don't like to read stories because it's boring. So, and he does not like the read stories because they are boring. So, when we use correct grammar, our writing becomes easier to read and more professional. The next one is show, don't tell me. Make your language concrete, not abstract. Specific, not general. So this means instead of just telling your readers what happens or how someone feels, you should show it through actions and details. So it makes your writing more interesting and alive. So for example, Anna was scared. So Anna's hand shook as she slowly opened the dark door. So see the difference. So the second sentence helps the reader feel Anna's fear. So instead of saying emotions directly, show them through actions. So the next one is maintain a consistent style and tone. So your writing style and tone should match your character or situation. Yeah, if your narrator is a child, use simple words. If your story is serious, don't suddenly use funny or awkward words. So for example, the little boy said, "I am extremely delighted to receive a toy." Then the little boy said, "Yay, I got a toy." So the second one sounds more natural for a child. So always make sure your words fit the mood and personality of your characters. So the next one is use adjectives and adverbs with restraint. So adjectives are describing words like beautiful or shiny, and adverbs are words like quickly or softly. So to many of them, make sure your writing sounds fake or exaggerated. So for example, the big, bright, beautiful, shiny, amazing car quickly zoomed loudly down the long, wide road. So the red car sped down the road. So simple descriptions are often stronger and easier to read. So use adjectives and adverbs only when they truly add meaning. The next one is use vulgar language responsibly. Sometimes strong or rude language can fit the character. So for example, if the person is angry or a street fighter, but it should be used carefully. So there are better ways to show emotion without using bad words. So for example, get loose, you idiot. He shouted every minute. So he clenched his fist and said through his teeth, leave me alone. So the second one still shows anger, but in a cleaner, more creative way. Vulgar words should never be used just for shock. They must have a purpose. So let's talk about fiction and drama. So the first one is action. So one of two common flaws is lack of action, the story that relies too much on description or dialogue, or the play in which no one does anything but talk. So in writing a story, action means that something happens, the character do something, make choices, or face problems. So a story without action becomes boring because it's just people talking or things being described with no real events. The next one is plot. So a good plot is not easy to create. So the plot is the main storyline of a fiction piece. It's what happens from beginning to end. So a good plot makes readers curious and excited to know what will happen next. So a good plot also has a bit of surprise or twist, something that readers don't expect. So that if it does not have to end with a big shock, but it shouldn't to be easy to guess. So the next one is characterization. So it takes more art to create a real complex human being than a stereotype introducing dialogue. So a characterization means the way an author creates and develops the people in the story. So good writers don't just make plot or the one-dimensional characters. So they make them feel real and believable, like real people with emotions, habits, and stories. So to make a character realistic, writers give specific details about what they look like, how they act, speak, and think. The next one is introducing dialogue. So common errors introduce dialogue grammatically. So dialogue is the conversation between characters in a story. So it makes the story more interesting and realistic because it lets readers hear how characters talk and feel. So but when writing dialogue, there are rules to follow, so it's clear and natural. So when writing dialogue, make it sound real and easy to follow. Use correct grammar, make it clear who's speaking, and let actions and tones show how the characters feel. And the last one is verb tense. So most stories and novels are in the past tense for good reason. So verb tense tells us when something happens in the past, present, or future. So for example, in writing stories, most writers use past tense because it sounds more natural and easier to follow. So when we tell a story to someone, like once upon a time, we usually talk about things that already happened.
And now let's proceed to writing a short story. So what is a short story? So the short story is usually concerned with a single effect conveyed in only one or a few significant episodes or scenes. The form encourages economy of setting, concise narrative, and the omission of a complex plot. Character is disclosed in action and dramatic encounter, but is seldom fully developed. Despite its relatively limited scope, though a short story is often judged by its ability to provide a complete or satisfying treatment of its characters and subject. So, before the 19th century, the short story was not generally regarded as a distinct literary form. But although in this sense it may seem to be uh, an uniquely modern genre, the fact is that short prose fiction is nearly as old as language itself. Throughout history, mankind has enjoyed various types of brief narratives, jests, anecdotes, uh, studied digressions, short allegorical romances, moralizing fairy tales, short myths, and abbreviated historical legends. So none of this constitutes uh, a short story, as it has been defined since the 19th century, but they do make up a large part of milieu from which the modern short story emerged. So short stories' uniqueness is in the conclusion, which makes readers rethink their interpretations. Experienced writers can craft a morally driven short story that hits the reader like a sledgehammer. The opening sentence should hook the reader and get them to want to know more. Consider the reader's experience and what they feel at the beginning, middle, and conclusion. For instance, if the short story is about a T-Rex, the central section ought to persuade the reader that the T-Rex is narrating the story. So it takes letting the first draft and stand for a few days, editing it, and having other writers read it to get comments. You must think, right? You must write what happens, not what you think it means, and think about why there are misunderstandings. So beta readers who have previously written good review comments can be used to establish why there are misunderstanding. So that is all for our report, and these are the list of references that we use.